Walk into a room full of children, and something incredible is happening. Without grammar books, without vocabulary lists, without language courses, without studying for hours, they're learning a language fast, very fast. In just a few years, most children can understand thousands of words, hold conversations, express emotions, ask questions, tell stories, and communicate naturally. Now compare that to many adults learning English. Some spend years studying grammar, years memorizing vocabulary, years watching lessons, yet speaking still feels difficult. So what is happening here? Are children simply smarter? Do they have special brains? Or is there something else going on? The answer is fascinating, and it can completely change the way you learn English. Hello, my amazing students, and welcome again to your channel. My name is Clara, and today we're going to explore why children learn languages faster than adults, what science says about language learning, and most importantly, what adults can learn from children to improve their own English fluency. At the same time, you'll improve your English listening skills, vocabulary, speaking confidence, and overall English fluency. So let's begin. One of the biggest myths in language learning is this: children learn languages faster because they're naturally better at languages. It sounds reasonable, it sounds logical, and that's why so many people believe it. But the truth is more interesting. Children are not necessarily better language learners. In many ways, adults are actually better learners. Adults can understand explanations faster. Adults can recognize patterns more quickly. Adults can use logic. Adults can study efficiently. So if adults have all these advantages, why do children often become fluent more easily? The answer has very little to do with intelligence and a lot to do with behavior. Now think about how children learn a language. They don't sit down and say, "Today I will study the present perfect." They don't memorize grammar charts. They don't worry about making mistakes. They don't ask, "What's the fastest method?" Instead, they interact with the language constantly, every day, for hours. And that's a huge difference. Now imagine a young child learning their first language. They hear thousands of sentences every single day. Morning, afternoon, evening, every meal, every conversation, every game, every story. Language surrounds them. They're immersed in it. And immersion changes the brain. Now let's compare that to many adult learners. An adult might study English for 30 minutes, maybe an hour, then spend the rest of the day living entirely in their native language. No listening, no speaking, no reading, no exposure. And then they wonder why progress feels slow. The difference isn't talent, it's contact. Children spend an enormous amount of time interacting with language. Now here's something fascinating. Children are also terrible perfectionists, and that's actually an advantage. A child says the wrong word, they keep talking. A child mispronounces something, they keep talking. A child makes grammar mistakes, they keep talking. They don't stop. They don't overanalyze. They don't become embarrassed. They simply continue communicating. And communication creates improvement. Now think about adults. Many adults are intelligent, very intelligent. But sometimes intelligence creates a problem. Adults become self-conscious. They worry about mistakes. They worry about pronunciation. They worry about sounding foolish. And that fear often reduces practice. Ironically, the thing protecting them from mistakes is also slowing their progress. Now here's another important difference. Children focus on meaning. Adults often focus on correctness. A child hears, "Do you want some water?" They're thinking about water, the message, the meaning. Adults often hear the same sentence and start analyzing grammar, the tense, the structure, the vocabulary. And while analysis has value, communication is where language truly lives. Now imagine two learners. One spends most of their energy understanding messages. The other spends most of their energy checking for mistakes. Who do you think develops more natural fluency over time? Usually, the first learner, because language exists for communication, not perfection. Now here's a powerful realization. Children don't learn language because they're trying to learn language. They learn language because they're trying to connect with people, to play, to ask questions, to express emotions, to explore the world. Language is simply the tool, and that mindset changes everything. Because when communication becomes the goal, language improves naturally. Now imagine yourself learning English with a childlike mindset. Not childish, childlike, curious, fearless, willing to make mistakes, focused on communication, focused on understanding, focused on participation. Suddenly, the learning experience feels very different, much lighter, much more natural, much more enjoyable. And that's the lesson many successful learners eventually discover. Children don't become fluent because they have magical brains. They become fluent because they spend more time using language than worrying about language. And that may be one of the most valuable lessons an adult learner can learn. Here's something that surprises many people. During the early stages of language learning, adults often learn faster than children. Yes, faster. That sounds strange because we've heard the opposite for years. We've been told that children are language learning machines and adults are at a disadvantage. But if you take a child and an adult who are both starting a new language today, the adult will often learn more vocabulary in a week, understand grammar explanations more quickly, recognize patterns faster, and make progress at a much higher speed initially. So why do children eventually seem more fluent? The answer is fascinating. Adults are better at learning information. Children are better at living inside the language. And those are two very different things. Now imagine teaching 10 new words to a child and an adult. The adult will probably memorize them faster. Their brain is already developed. They understand learning strategies. They can make connections with words they already know. They can organize information efficiently. Children usually cannot do those things. Yet, years later, the child often sounds more natural, more relaxed, more fluent. Why? Because fluency isn't built from information alone. It's built from experience. And children collect an enormous amount of experience. Now think about a typical child. If they're surrounded by a language, they interact with it constantly. Playing, watching, listening, talking, asking questions, making jokes, arguing, exploring, hour after hour, day after day, year after year. The exposure is massive. Now compare that to many adults. Adults often approach language learning like a school subject. They study, take notes, watch lessons, memorize vocabulary, then stop. The learning session ends, and English disappears until tomorrow. That's a huge difference, because languages grow through contact, not only through study. Now here's another important factor. Adults are busy, very busy. Children are not. Adults have jobs, responsibilities, bills, stress, schedules, family obligations. Children have far more time available for exploration and experimentation. And time matters a lot. Now let's go deeper. Adults often want immediate results. They want to feel progress quickly. They want proof that their effort is working. Children don't think that way. A child doesn't ask, "When will I become fluent?" They simply engage with the language. And because they're focused on the process instead of the result, they stay consistent. Now here's something interesting psychologically. Adults are often trying to protect their identity. Nobody enjoys looking inexperienced. Nobody enjoys making mistakes publicly. Nobody enjoys sounding less intelligent than they really are. So adults often avoid situations where mistakes might happen. Children don't care nearly as much. They speak, experiment, guess, try, fail, and then try again. That's one reason they accumulate experience so rapidly. Now imagine two learners. One studies English for an hour and then spends the rest of the day avoiding it. The other spends that same hour studying, but also listens, reads, speaks, and interacts with English throughout the day. Who do you think becomes more fluent? Usually, the second learner, because fluency grows from repeated contact, not isolated study sessions. Now here's a powerful realization. The real advantage children have isn't their brain, it's their behavior. They're curious, they're fearless, they're persistent, they're willing to sound wrong, they're willing to be beginners. And those qualities create ideal learning conditions. Now imagine if adults combined their intelligence with those childlike qualities. Their ability to understand explanations, their ability to study efficiently, their ability to recognize patterns, combined with curiosity, consistency, exposure, and fearlessness. The results could be incredible. And that's exactly why many adults become highly successful language learners, not by becoming children, but by adopting some of the behaviors that make children effective learners. Because the goal is not to learn like a child in every way. The goal is to keep your adult advantages while borrowing the child's mindset. And when that happens, language learning becomes much faster, much more enjoyable, and much more natural. One of the greatest advantages children have when learning a language is surprisingly simple. They are not afraid of sounding wrong, and that changes everything. Now think about a child learning to speak. They say words incorrectly. They use the wrong grammar. They invent strange sentences. Sometimes they say things that make absolutely no sense. Yet they keep talking, again and again and again. Why? Because their goal is communication, not perfection. Now imagine if adults behaved the same way. Imagine an English learner speaking freely without constantly worrying about every mistake, without replaying every sentence in their head, without judging themselves after every conversation. How much more practice would they get? How much faster would they improve? Probably much faster than they expect. Now here's something fascinating. Children make thousands of language mistakes. Thousands. Far more than most adult learners. Yet nobody sees those mistakes as failure. They're seen as a normal part of development. That's because everyone understands something important. The mistakes are not blocking learning. The mistakes are creating learning. Now let's go deeper. Many adults secretly believe they should speak correctly before they speak confidently. Children operate in the opposite direction. They speak confidently first. Correctness comes later. And that's a powerful lesson, because confidence creates practice. Practice creates improvement. Improvement creates accuracy. The process starts with action, not perfection. Now imagine a child learning the word went. At first, they might say, "I goed to the park." That's wrong, but it's also evidence of learning. The child is experimenting, testing patterns, trying to communicate. And through repeated exposure, the correct form eventually replaces the incorrect one. No panic, no embarrassment, just gradual improvement. Now compare that to many adult learners. An adult makes one grammar mistake in English, and suddenly their brain starts asking questions. Did I say that correctly? Did they notice? Do I sound foolish? Maybe I should stop talking. Maybe my English isn't good enough. And in that moment, the fear becomes a bigger obstacle than the mistake itself. Now here's something interesting. Most native speakers don't expect perfection from English learners. They expect communication. They expect effort. They expect occasional mistakes. In fact, many native speakers make mistakes themselves. Yet adult learners often hold themselves to impossible standards, standards that even native speakers don't meet. Now think about learning any skill. A beginner pianist makes mistakes. A beginner driver makes mistakes. A beginner athlete makes mistakes. Nobody expects perfection on day one. So why should language learning be different? The answer is, it shouldn't. Now here's another reason children progress quickly. They recover instantly. A child says something wrong, someone corrects them. 5 seconds later, they're talking again. The mistake is forgotten. The conversation continues. Adults often do the opposite. They carry the mistake with them for hours, sometimes for days, replaying it, analyzing it, judging themselves. And that emotional weight slows progress. Now imagine how much lighter language learning would feel if you treated mistakes the way children do. Not as evidence that you're failing, but as evidence that you're participating. Because participation is what creates fluency, not perfection. Participation. Now let's connect this to English listening. Every time you listen to English, your brain collects examples. Correct examples, natural examples, useful examples, and over time, those examples start correcting mistakes automatically. That's why exposure matters so much, because the brain learns patterns through repetition, not through fear. Now imagine yourself 1 year from now. You speak more often. You worry less about mistakes. You focus more on communication. You stop treating every error like a disaster. And because of that, you gain more experience, more confidence, more fluency, more progress. Not because you became perfect, because you became willing. Willing to try, willing to speak, willing to learn publicly. And that's exactly what children do so well. They understand something many adults forget. Language is not a test. It's a tool for connecting, sharing, learning, and communicating. And the people who use the tool consistently eventually become very good at it. Not because they avoided mistakes, because they kept going despite them. There's something interesting that happens when adults learn a language. They often become obsessed with rules. The correct tense, the correct preposition, the correct sentence structure, the correct grammar. And while those things matter, they sometimes become the center of attention. Meanwhile, children are focused on something completely different: meaning. Now think about a child hearing a sentence. The child isn't asking, why did they use the present continuous here? The child isn't analyzing grammar structures. The child is trying to understand the message. What does this mean? What is happening? What does this person want? Language for the child is a communication tool, not an academic subject. And that's a powerful distinction. Now imagine someone says, "Could you open the window?" A child immediately focuses on the message, the window, the request, the meaning. Many adult learners focus on the language itself. Why did they use could? Why not can? What's the grammar rule? What's the difference? Again, those questions have value. But if they become your primary focus, something important can happen. You start studying English more than experiencing English, and fluency grows through experience. Now here's something fascinating. The brain learns language most effectively when it's focused on understanding, not when it's focused on analyzing every detail. That's one reason children progress so naturally. Their attention stays on the message, and the grammar patterns enter their brain almost automatically through repetition. Now let's connect this to English listening. Imagine listening to a podcast. One learner is focused on understanding the story, the ideas, the emotions, the message. Another learner is stopping every 30 seconds to analyze grammar. Who is getting more natural exposure to English? Usually the first learner, because language is flowing naturally into their brain. Now, here's something important. This doesn't mean grammar is useless. Grammar absolutely matters. But grammar works best when it supports communication, not when it replaces communication. Think about driving a car. The rules of the road are important, very important. But if you spend your entire drive thinking about every rule, driving becomes stressful. Experienced drivers focus on the journey. The rules are still there, but they operate more automatically. Fluency works the same way. Now imagine a learner who hears English every day, reads English every day, speaks English every day, listens to stories, podcasts, conversations, and videos. Over time, the brain starts noticing patterns, not because someone forced it to, because that's what human brains do. They recognize patterns, and eventually those patterns become natural language instincts. Now, here's another reason children progress quickly. They care more about understanding than being correct. Adults often care more about being correct than understanding. That sounds subtle, but it changes everything. Because communication rewards participation, not perfection. The person who communicates imperfectly gains experience. The person who waits for perfection often gains delay. Now let's go deeper. Many adults learned language through school systems built around tests, grades, rules, corrections. As a result, they often associate language learning with accuracy. Children associate language learning with interaction, and interaction creates fluency. Now imagine yourself approaching English differently. Instead of asking, "What grammar rule should I learn today?" you start asking, "What English can I understand today? What English can I listen to today? What English can I use today?" Suddenly, your attention shifts from rules to communication, from analysis to participation. And that's often where major progress begins. Because language was never created so people could pass grammar exams, language was created so people could connect, share ideas, tell stories, ask questions, build relationships. And the learners who remember that usually make faster progress. Not because they study less, but because they focus on what language was designed to do in the first place: communicate. And children understand that naturally, which is one of the biggest reasons they often seem to learn languages so effortlessly. After everything we've explored in this episode, a fascinating question remains. If children aren't smarter than adults, if adults can actually learn faster in some situations, then what exactly should adults learn from children? The answer is not grammar. It's not vocabulary, and it's not some secret language learning technique. It's mindset. Because when you look closely, children approach language very differently, and those differences create extraordinary results. Now, think about curiosity. Children are naturally curious. They ask questions constantly. Why? How? What does that mean? What's this called? They're not worried about looking foolish. They're interested. And curiosity is one of the most powerful learning tools in the world. Because curious people pay attention. Curious people explore. Curious people stay engaged. Now imagine learning English with more curiosity. Instead of seeing English as homework, you see it as discovery. Every new word becomes interesting. Every podcast becomes an adventure. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to learn something new. That mindset changes everything. Now, here's another lesson children teach us. Consistency beats intensity. Children don't usually learn a language by studying 8 hours on Saturday. They learn through daily exposure. A little today, a little tomorrow, a little the next day, month after month, year after year. And those small interactions accumulate into fluency. Many adults do the opposite. They study intensely for a few days, then disappear for a week, then study intensely again. Consistency often creates better results than occasional bursts of effort. Now let's talk about patience. Children don't wake up every morning asking, "Am I fluent yet?" They simply continue. They trust the process. Adults often become frustrated because progress feels slow. But language learning is not a sprint. It's a gradual transformation, and patience allows that transformation to happen. Now here's perhaps the most important lesson of all. Children participate. They don't wait until they're ready. They don't wait until they're perfect. They don't wait until they know every grammar rule. They participate immediately. And participation creates experience. Experience creates confidence. Confidence creates fluency. The cycle starts with action. Now imagine if more adults approached English that way, speaking despite mistakes, listening without translating every word, reading without stopping at every unknown expression, communicating before feeling completely ready. Progress would accelerate dramatically. Now here's something powerful. Adults often focus on what they don't know. Children focus on what they can do. A child with 50 words uses all 50 words. An adult with 2,000 words sometimes stays silent because they don't know 3 more. That's a completely different mindset. And mindset shapes behavior. Now let's go deeper. The greatest advantage adults have is awareness. The greatest advantage children have is freedom. Adults understand learning. Children embrace learning. The ideal language learner combines both: the awareness of an adult, the curiosity of a child, the discipline of an adult, the fearlessness of a child, the knowledge of an adult, the willingness of a child. That's a powerful combination. Now imagine yourself 1 year from today. You're listening more, speaking more, reading more, enjoying English more. You're less afraid of mistakes, less obsessed with perfection, more focused on communication, more focused on understanding, more focused on participation. And because of that, your fluency keeps growing. Not because you discovered a secret method, because you adopted a healthier approach. Now here's the deeper truth. Children don't learn languages quickly because they're magical. They learn quickly because they do many things right naturally. They stay curious. They stay consistent. They focus on meaning. They accept mistakes. They participate constantly. And those behaviors create ideal conditions for language growth. The good news? Adults can learn those behaviors too. You don't need to become a child. You simply need to borrow some of the habits that make children such effective learners. Because fluency isn't reserved for children. Fluency belongs to anyone willing to stay curious, stay consistent, and keep communicating. And perhaps that's the most encouraging lesson of all. The abilities that help children become fluent are not hidden. They're available to every learner, including you, starting today.